Echoes of Yesterday. Chapter 1, A Glimpse of the Past. The London sky was a soft shade of grey, clouds hanging low as light rain misted over the streets. Emma Clark hurried through the cobblestone alleys, her mind elsewhere, trapped in memories she wished she could forget. She had lived in the city her entire life, but lately, the streets felt colder, the people more distant. She had just left her teaching job at the art academy, where her students' bright, hopeful faces were the only solace in her increasingly lonely days. It had been 3 years since her fiancé, Oliver, had died in a tragic accident. 3 years since her world had crumbled, leaving her drifting between the past and present, unable to fully let go. Everywhere she went, she saw pieces of him, parks they had strolled through, cafes they had sat in, galleries they had admired together. As Emma crossed the street to her favorite coffee shop, the Golden Hour, her phone buzzed with a message from her best friend, Lily. "Lily, don't forget about the art exhibition tonight. I'll meet you there." Emma hesitated for a moment. She had promised Lily she'd attend the exhibition at the gallery where she and Oliver had often gone. It was a showcase for emerging artists, many of whom Emma had taught over the years. She knew she couldn't keep hiding from the world, but going there would feel like opening an old wound. With a sigh, she replied, "I'll be there." Later that evening, as Emma walked into the gallery, the familiar scent of paint and varnish filled the air. The place was full of people, voices echoing against the high ceilings as they admired the artwork. Emma wandered through the crowd, trying to avoid too much conversation, when her eyes fell upon a painting at the far end of the room. It was a large, vibrant piece, full of life and color, yet there was something about it that made her breath catch in her throat. The bold brushstrokes, the way the light and shadows played together, it reminded her of Oliver's work. He had always painted in a similar style, one that made you feel like the canvas was alive. "Beautiful, isn't it?" A voice startled her out of her thoughts. She turned to find a man standing next to her. He was tall, with dark hair and deep blue eyes that seemed to hold a world of emotion. He smiled softly, though his expression held a certain sadness. He had the kind of presence that drew people in, yet he seemed somewhat detached, as if he wasn't truly part of the scene around him. Emma nodded, her throat tightening. "It's incredible. It reminds me of someone I used to know." The man tilted his head slightly. "You must have known someone very talented." "He was," Emma said quietly, looking down at her hands. "He passed away a few years ago." "I'm sorry," he said, his voice filled with genuine empathy. "Loss never really leaves us, does it?" She glanced up at him, surprised by the understanding in his words. "No, it doesn't. But, who are you?" "I'm William," he said, offering his hand. "I'm the artist." Emma blinked in surprise. This was the man behind the painting? The one who had somehow captured the essence of what she had lost? "I'm Emma," she replied, shaking his hand. "Your work it's beautiful." "Thank you. That means a lot," William said softly. There was a quiet intensity in his gaze, as if he could see through the mask she wore every day. "I paint from experience, from memories. Some of them are hard to let go." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected to meet someone who understood so deeply what she had been through. But even as the connection between them grew, a wave of guilt washed over her. She shouldn't feel anything toward another man. Not yet. Not when Oliver's ghost was still so present in her life. Chapter 2, The Spark of Something New. In the weeks that followed, Emma found herself thinking about William more than she wanted to admit. His paintings, his words, his presence, they all lingered in her mind, haunting her like a melody she couldn't shake. It was as though meeting him had awakened something within her, a spark she thought had died with Oliver. She tried to push the thoughts away, but fate had other plans. One afternoon, as she was leaving the academy, she spotted William standing across the street, looking up at the school with curiosity. "William," she called out, crossing the road toward him. "What are you doing here?" He smiled, a bit sheepishly. "I was in the area and thought I'd see where you worked. I didn't mean to seem like a stalker, I promise." Emma chuckled, feeling her tension ease. No, it's fine. It's just, I didn't expect to see you. I'm glad I ran into you, though, William said, his tone softening. I've been thinking about our conversation at the gallery. You mentioned someone you lost. I didn't mean to pry, but I know how that feels. If you ever want to talk about it, I'm here. Emma looked at him, torn between the desire to keep her pain locked away and the need to share it with someone who understood. After a long moment, she nodded. Maybe I do need to talk. They ended up at a small cafe nearby, where Emma told him about Oliver, how they had met, their plans for the future, the accident that had taken him away from her. She hadn't spoken about it so openly in a long time, but with William, the words flowed naturally. He listened intently, never interrupting, offering only quiet support as she recounted the hardest moments of her life. When she finished, there were tears in her eyes, but for the first time in years, they weren't tears of despair. They were the kind that came with the relief of sharing a burden. Thank you for listening, Emma whispered, wiping her eyes. William reached across the table and gently placed his hand over hers. Thank you for trusting me with that. I know how hard it is to open up. They sat in silence for a while, letting the moment settle between them. Emma wasn't sure what was happening, but she felt something shift inside her, something that had been closed off for so long. As they walked out of the cafe, William turned to her with a hesitant smile. I know this might sound crazy, but would you want to come to my studio sometime? I'd love to show you more of my work. Emma hesitated. She wasn't sure if she was ready to open that door, to let someone new into her life in a way that might change everything. But there was something about William that made her feel safe, like he wouldn't push her beyond what she could handle. I'd like that, she said quietly, surprising herself. Chapter 3, Healing Through Art. A few days later, Emma found herself standing in William's studio, surrounded by canvases of all sizes, some finished, some still in progress. The room was bathed in warm afternoon light, and the faint scent of oil paint filled the air. William stood next to a large canvas, his fingers stained with paint, his face focused as he worked on a new piece. He glanced over at Emma with a small smile. Welcome to my world, he said, stepping back from the painting. What do you think? Emma looked around, taking in the sheer range of emotions captured in his work. Each piece seemed to tell a story, some filled with light and joy, others heavy with loss and longing. It was beautiful and overwhelming all at once. You're incredible, she said softly, feeling the weight of her words. Your paintings, they're so full of life. William's eyes met hers, and for a moment, they stood in silence, the unspoken connection between them growing stronger. He walked over to one of the smaller canvases, pulling it into the light. This one, he said quietly, is about the day I lost someone close to me. My sister. Emma felt a sharp pang in her chest. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. William shook his head, his expression distant. It was a long time ago, but I still think about her every day. I started painting because of her. She was always the one who pushed me to chase my dreams. After she passed, it was the only thing that helped me heal. Emma looked at the painting, a swirling mix of dark and light, chaos and calm. It was raw, emotional, just like the way she had felt after losing Oliver. She realized then that William understood her pain in a way few people could. I think you and I are more alike than I thought, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. William nodded, his gaze soft. Maybe that's why we met. The days that followed were filled with long conversations, quiet moments in the studio, and the slow, gentle opening of Emma's heart. She hadn't realized how much she needed someone like William in her life, someone who didn't ask her to forget Oliver, but who helped her find a way to move forward while still carrying his memory with her. Their friendship deepened, and soon it became something more. They shared their grief, their hopes, and slowly, their hearts. Emma hadn't thought she could love again, but with William, it felt different. It wasn't about replacing what she had lost, it was about creating something new. Chapter 4, The Shadows of the Past. Just when Emma thought she had found peace, the past reappeared like a ghost. One afternoon, she received an unexpected call from Oliver's mother, Patricia. Emma hadn't spoken to her since the funeral. The conversation was polite, but Patricia's voice held an edge of bitterness, a reminder of the tragedy they had both endured. "I heard you've been seeing someone," Patricia said, her tone cold. Emma felt her stomach twist. I have. But it doesn't mean I've forgotten Oliver." Patricia's silence on the other end of the line felt heavy, like a judgment Emma hadn't asked for. Finally, she spoke, her voice tight. "I'm glad you're moving on, Emma, but don't forget who he was. Don't forget what he meant." The words stung, cutting through the fragile happiness Emma had started to build. After the call ended, she sat on her bed, tears spilling down her cheeks. How could she explain to Patricia, or even to herself, that loving William didn't mean she was erasing Oliver? That night, Emma found herself pulling out old photographs of her and Oliver. She hadn't looked at them in a long time. As she flipped through the memories, a wave of guilt washed over her. Was she betraying him by letting someone else into her heart? The next day, she avoided William's calls. She wasn't sure what to say to him, how to explain the conflict tearing her apart. Part of her wanted to run back to the safety of her grief, where she didn't have to make difficult choices, where everything was still, frozen in time. But William knew her too well. He showed up at her apartment that evening, his expression full of concern. "Emma, what's going on? You've been distant. Did I do something wrong?" She shook her head, unable to meet his eyes. "It's not you. It's me. I don't know if I can do this. It feels like I'm betraying Oliver." William stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. "You're not betraying him, Emma. He'll always be a part of you. But you're still here. You're allowed to live your life, to find happiness again. It doesn't mean you're forgetting him." Emma looked at him, tears filling her eyes. "I don't know if I can." William reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands. "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm just asking you to let yourself love again." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Emma knew he was right, but the fear still gnawed at her. Could she really move forward without feeling like she was leaving Oliver behind? Chapter 5, Letting Go. In the days that followed, Emma grappled with her emotions, torn between the past and the present. But as she spent more time with William, she began to see that loving him didn't take away from what she had with Oliver. It simply added another layer to her life, a new chapter in her story. One evening, as they stood on the rooftop of William's studio, watching the city lights flicker below, Emma took a deep breath. "I've been holding on to the past for so long," she said quietly. "But I think I'm ready to let go. Not of Oliver, but of the fear that I can't move on." William smiled, his hand gently squeezing hers. "You don't have to let go of him completely, Emma. Just make space for the future." She nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. With William by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. And so, as the seasons changed and life moved forward, Emma found herself moving, slowly but surely. The echoes of yesterday still